totally switching gears.
Yeah.
What do you say to people who say, "Oh, you're Lutheran now. You must be an Arminian"?
Oh, yeah.
How you engage with that?
So I have that. I mean, I feel like I have this conversation all the time. When I was because I went to a college I went to Geneva College, which is a reform school.
Okay.
Great school,
Yeah.
great professors. But I was in an apartment with like 6 guys who were all theology majors of one kind or another. And we were all Calvinists. Yeah. So when I made that transition to Lutheranism, they were like, "Whoa, like, what are you doing? Are you an Arminian now?
Yeah.
You know, like what is going on?" Yeah. And I feel like it took years to explain it into their heads, and finally they're like, "Okay, I get it." You know?
Right.
But it took a while because I think when you're in that mode, because you also have to remember Arminianism came as a response to Calvinism.
Right.
So Arminianism and Calvinism have always been in conversation with each other, and they come from the same background.
Yeah.
So Lutheranism didn't come from either of those. It was its own tradition. So it hasn't really had that same background where Arminianism and Calvinism have been formed in debate with each other.
Yeah.
So because of that, people tend to think you have to be one or the other. You're either a Calvinist or you're an Arminian. And if you meet a Calvinist and they talk to you, and they'll be like, "Oh, you're an Arminian," but then you meet an Arminian and you try to explain what you believe, they're like, "Oh, you're a Calvinist." So,
exactly.
You get responses from both sides, and they're both like, "No, you're the other."
Yeah.
And when you try to explain what you believe, they're like, "That makes no sense." So,
exactly.
So kind of the really basic, and this is, I give this illustration or this basic thing a lot, explanation, and some people say it's simplistic, and probably so. But just to get a basic overview, it's, you're basically dealing with 2 questions when you're asking the Calvinist Arminian question, which is why are some people saved and why are some people not saved? Okay, so in both of those traditions, they're going to have one answer to the 2 questions. Okay, so you ask the Calvinist, why are some saved and why are others not saved? They're going to say God's decree. And yes, in Calvinism, when you're talking about why some are not saved, it may be, depending on your view, that it's God decreed to pass them over, not an active thing. Okay, so you've got those discussions. But ultimately, it really does come down to God's decree, because God did decree to save some, and he decreed to pass people over or not to send Christ to die for those people. And if you ask an Arminian that same question, why are some saved, why are others not saved? They're going to say free will, right? So they're going to say, why are you saved? Because you, through your free will, maybe aided by God's grace in some way, but aided by your free will, you've chosen to follow Christ. And if you're not saved, you by your free will have rejected. The Lutheran does not give one answer to the 2 questions. We give 2 different answers. And that's what people are like, this doesn't make sense, which we're also okay with. But so the first is, why are some saved? God's grace. Completely God. Nothing that we've done. My will did nothing. The language Luther uses is we're purely passive in our conversion. God renews and changes our wills. God gives us a faith. Our faith. It's a divine gift. If I am elect, it's totally unconditional. We sound like a Calvinist, right? But then why are others not saved? Well, then, when we get to that question, we sound like the Arminian because we say, well, it's their will. Yeah. God wanted them to be saved. He desired their salvation. Christ died for them. Yeah. And the only reason they're not saved is because they've resisted the saving will of God. They've resisted the work of the Spirit. So people say, that doesn't make sense. How can you have like this unequal thing? Like the pieces don't like quite fit. But that's really what Scripture gives us. A good example of this is, and there are many, many examples of this, think about the way that Jesus talks about heaven being prepared for the elect versus hell being prepared for the reprobate. Totally different, right? Totally different. So for the elect, I've gone to prepare a place for you. Yeah. For the reprobate, they're going to a place prepared for the devil and his angels, right? It's not even prepared for people. They end up there because of their rejection of Christ. But you see, it is unequal. It's very unequal, the way that people end up in heaven and God's activity there versus this very passive, hell wasn't even there for you, but you've rejected the gospel and ended up there. And there are a lot of other texts you can go to, but I think that one basic one gives an idea of how these things work.